Okay, I just realized I never had my microphone on. I'm going to stop the stream and restart it over fresh, so there won't be all of this time of, um, of dead air on the video. I'll delete this after it posts. So I'm going to stop the stream and start it right back up again. Okay, let's try this again. Welcome to AHNC, All Hat No Cattle. I'm Hat. Today we are reading the second part of the Michael Cohen May 6th transcript from his closed-door testimony in front of the House Intelligence Committee of this year. I read the February 28th, 2019 testimony back on Wednesday, and that's up on YouTube already, so you can listen to that if you want to. Yesterday we read part one of this. I think my microphone's booming a little bit. Let me back it off some. There we go. So yesterday we read part one of this, and we got very deep into it, actually, much farther than I had expected. We basically got 200 pages in about 7 hours. So that only leaves us 57 pages to go, which is why I started at 11 today and not 9, because we just don't need that much time to finish it. To sum up, yesterday the Democrats did their best to try to get Cohen to say that President Trump had directed him to lie to Congress about the date that the Trump Tower Moscow project had closed, because Cohen said January in his testimony, when in fact it was June, and the letter of intent was officially negated in November, right after the election. And Cohen couldn't do that because he never heard Trump say the words, "do this, lie for me," or he also never heard the words, "I'm going to give you a pardon if you play ball and toe the party line." And that line, the party line, has only come out of Cohen's mouth throughout all of the testimony I've read recently, including the Mueller report. So it sounds like he's the only one who used that particular phrase in this entire investigation. Makes you wonder if it ever happened, doesn't it? So he didn't give the Democrats anything on that. Now they're trying to make him look like a fool. And I'm not sure why. I believe it's because they want him to appear to be a dupe that Trump used in order to act as a cutout between him and the Russians. Well, that doesn't hold water, because if Cohen was supposed to be a dupe, then why would he be the one negotiating for the Trump Tower Moscow deal, which, according to Cohen, he made a pretty good deal on. He got about 1 percentage point higher from the Russians that he had in any other project. And they asked him why he thought that was. They were hoping that he would say, because the Russians want Trump to be in their pocket. Instead, he said, well, I've gotten better as a negotiator. Then they fed him that question directly, and he said, well, I guess that's possible. So they didn't give them anything on that either. And the Republicans have been yielding the remainder of their time to the Democrats recently. They had 8 minutes left after a break, and they gave that to the majority, if you will, the Democrats. And then right here on this page, it was time for the Republicans to have their 30-minute session with Cohen, and they gave the Democrats all 30 minutes back. I see a couple reasons for that. One, the the Republicans realize that they look mean if they keep Cohen in the in the witness chair for very long, because he is in a great deal of pain. He had shoulder surgery recently, and his head is also throbbing, and he's due for cortisone injections at his doctor's the day after this testimony. So you know he's at the end of his rope if he's telling the truth. And I have a feeling that you can tell by looking at him how he's doing. I've noticed in some of his answers that he's not fully aware of what the question was, unlike earlier in the testimony. So I believe he is in a great deal of pain. His mind is muddled by that. I've been there. I know what I'm talking about. The other thing is, if the Republicans are the rat bastards, sorry, are the naughty men that everyone says they are, then they may just be doing it because they know the Democrats are doing such a great job of screwing up Cohen's image that as a witness, that they don't need to touch it. Just let the Democrats continue on to make him look bad and not lift a finger to stop them. Or they just got everything out of them that they wanted. I guess that's number 3. They got everything they needed, and they don't need to work at it anymore. Either way, the Democrats have the remainder of the time left. So, with that said, let's get started with the last part of Michael Cohen's closed-door testimony transcript in front of the House Intelligence Committee on March 6th of this year. By the way, the chairman refers to Pencil Neck Schiff, and I have tried very diligently to not refer to him by that honorific. I try to call him by his true name, Pencil Neck. So you will either hear me refer to him as Pencil Neck or Chairman Pencil Neck. That's as far as I'll give him the word. Here we go. Pencil Neck. I yield back to the minority, which in this case is the Republican Party. Redacted. There is a person on the Republican team whose name has been redacted throughout this entire document. I have no idea who it is. Maybe it'll come up later in some report, but I got nothing. And he's done some questioning too, so it's not like he's some minor player. Redacted. We yield our 30 minutes to you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Mitchell, who's one of the main investigators with the Democrat side, along with a gentleman named Goldman, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Mitchell, from January, the same period, January of 2016 through May of 2016, did you speak with anyone on the campaign about the Trump Tower Moscow project other than Mr. Trump? Not that I recall. Exhibit 27 was marked for identification, majority exhibit. Mr. Mitchell, handing you majority exhibit 27. Once again, this is a series of text messages between you and Mr. Sater. The first date on the first page is May 3rd of 2016. The last date on the last page is May 6th of 2016. Do you have that in front of you, sir? I do. On the third page, and Bates number ending in 143, there's a mention at the bottom that says, Peskov would like to invite you as his guest to the St. Petersburg Forum, which is Russia's Davos, June 16th to 19th. Do you see that? I do. And you mentioned the St. Petersburg Forum a little earlier today, correct? Correct. And did you ever travel to Russia? I've never been to Russia or St. Petersburg. At this point, did you intend to go to the forum? If there was something that was legitimate, that I could justify traveling across the globe, sure, I would have gone. And Mr. Sater says, possibly introduce you to either Putin or Medvedev. 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 Why couldn't I say that? Medvedev. Do you see that? Yes. The only person he didn't say is God. Cohen has a great sense of humor. He breaks me up all the time. And was it your understanding that he was trying to get you to travel to Russia? You think? Did you speak? You can tell he's tired about being kept in his damn chair. The Democrats told him a good 45 minutes ago, yeah, we'll get you out of here soon. We're just trying to wrap some things up. And they keep hammering away at stuff that they've already talked about. He is not happy with them. Did you speak to Mr. Trump about this invitation? I don't recall at that time. Did you speak with anyone within the Trump organization about this invitation? I don't recall. What about the Trump family? I don't recall. Was this invitation to attend the St. Petersburg Forum, these conversations with Mr. Sater, were these related to the Trump Tower Moscow deal? It was related to the Trump Tower Moscow deal as well as new opportunities. Now, on May 26, 2016, Mr. Trump secured the needed number of delegates for the Republican nomination for president. Did Mr. Trump at that time tell you to stop pursuing the Trump Tower Moscow deal? No, sir. In fact, he actually asked me what's going on with Russia. When was that? Around that same given time. And that was referring to the Trump Tower deal? Correct. Going back to the criminal information, it states that from on or about June 9th to June 14th, Cohen, I'm sorry, sir, what page are you on? Mitchell, page 7. That's Majority Exhibit number 46. It says, from on or about June 9th to June 14th, 2016, Individual 2 sent numerous messages to Cohen about the travel, including forms for Mr. Cohen to complete. Is Individual 2 here, Mr. Sater? Yes, sir. Now they've gone to Majority Exhibit number 28. And I'm showing you Majority Exhibit 28. Now these text messages that you're referred to in the criminal information from June 9th to June 14th of 2016, yes. These are the ones that mention the meeting at the Atrium Snack Bar. This is regarding the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. And the criminal information says, on June 14, 2016, Cohen met with Individual 2, which is Mr. Sater, in the lobby of the company's headquarters to inform Individual 2 he would not be traveling at that time. That is correct. And is that the meeting at the Atrium Snack Bar? Yes. On June 14th, 2016, the Washington Post broke the story. Yeah, right, broke the story. It was handed to them on a silver platter. Okay, back to the text. Broke the story about the DNC having been hacked by Russian actors, which is completely false. I've gone over the VIPS article. You can see it. The link is back in, I'll put it in this video too. Let me just write it down. All right, cat, where'd my pencil go? Well, the cats have eaten my pencil. And I don't have a spare on the desk right now. Quality production, as Matt Christensen likes to say. Quality production. I will do my best to remember that and to put it in the... you know what I'll do? I'll leave myself a note. Okay, I can check that when we're done. Let's see. Hacked by Russian actors, the question continues. Did your cancellation of the trip to the St. Petersburg Forum have anything to do with the DNC having been hacked? No. And why did you cancel that trip? It was never scheduled. Why did you decide not? Why did you tell Mr. Sater on June 14th that you were not going to be traveling at that time? Because again, it's 3 days before the beginning. And even if you wanted to get a BC, you couldn't get it quick enough. That's supposed to be visa, not BC. not to mention all the statements that he'd previously made about the invites and who was going to be sponsoring us going there turned out to be inaccurate. Did you tell Mr. Trump that you would not be traveling? I did not. I don't recall bringing it up with him. Mitchell, Mr. Chairman, pencil neck. Mr. Cohen, that concludes the Trump Tower Moscow questions. We're now going to enter a lightning round and ask you about a number of things, some of which you may know nothing about, so it could go very quickly. Lightning round. Where the bonus points are doubled. Mr. Cohen, can I say right now that I don't know anything about anything? Pencil neck, but we're very mindful of your time and your pain, so we will make this as painless as possible. If he wanted to make it as painless as possible, he would at least give the guy a recess, so he could go to his car and drop a handful of oxy. Or, hey, why not have a witness lit up on oxy, Why the hell not? But the guy's in serious pain. You can hear him say right now, I don't want to be doing this anymore. This is the second or third time he has said that to the Democrats. I am in a great deal of pain. I don't want to be here anymore. Let me go. And they won't let him go. I believe he's there under subpoena. No, I don't think he is. I think he came voluntarily. So they can't hold him. And if he is under subpoena, then I guess they can. But this is very, very cruel. This is torture is what it is. Let's go back to Mr. Cohen. Can I say right now that I don't know anything about anything? Pencil neck. But we're very mindful of your time and your pain, so we will make this as painless as possible. Mr. Monaco, we would agree to do it by written form if you like. Chairman, pencil neck. Let's try to get through it. We're going to move it very quickly now, Mr. Goldman. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. We're going to move it very quickly now. Mr. Goldman and Mr. Goldman questions. We do need you to try to answer these questions to the best of your recollection, Mr. Cohen. We understand your discomfort, but... So, Mr. Cohen, were you involved in any way with the presidential transition? No. Who were the individuals who were primarily in charge of the transition? There were quite a few people. Jared was involved in the transition. There were many people involved in the transition team. I think let's just focus for a second on some of the reporting and the special counsel's office pleadings about meetings with foreigners during the transition period. And I'm going to focus on your first-hand knowledge, not on anything that you read after the fact, okay? Place yourself in the time of transition. Were you aware of any meetings that anyone on the transition team had with anyone from the country of Qatar? Yes. Tell us what you recall. I recall that Jared had a meeting. I don't know who else off the top of my head was part of that, but I was contacted by Ahmad Zuberi, who told me that Jared was meeting with the Qatari delegation at the tower. Did he tell you what it was in relation to? What the meeting was about? I don't recall. What else do you remember about who the meeting was with? There were a couple of gentlemen that were from the country of Qatar, and they came to see Jared. I know some people say Qatar. I prefer Qatar. It's just whatever you prefer. And they came to see Jared. Just Jared and others. I just don't. You just don't know who? No, I don't. Do you know if they were discussing personal business or government business, or both? I don't know. Are you familiar with any meetings from anyone on the presidential transition with anyone from Saudi Arabia? I believe that Jared and the same group had also met with the delegation from Saudi Arabia. And who from Saudi Arabia do you recall? I don't. And how did you learn about this? I believe the same way it was either from Ahmad or someone else. So Ahmad Zuberi from Qatar would know about the Saudi connection. I was told. I don't recall how I was advised. And at the time, were you aware of whether Mr. Trump or anyone on the presidential transition team had any meetings or communications with anyone from Russia? No, I'm not aware. Are you aware of whether Jared Kushner met with Sergei Gorkov, who is chairman of VEB Bank? I'm unaware. Are you unaware of whether anyone that there was a meeting with members or individuals from the UAE in Trump Tower in December 2016? I'm unaware. Do you know Mohammed bin Zayed Omnian? Wow. NBC? Not MBS, NBC. No. Do you know someone named George Nader? I do not. Are you aware of any meetings that Michael Flynn had with anyone from Russia? I am not. Are you aware of a meeting? Do you know Eric Prince? I do not. You mentioned last time the Agalarovs. Do you know any of the Agalarovs? I've met I've met what I think is the entire family. I've met Aras Agalarov, who's the dad. I've met the wife. I've met Emin. I've met the daughter. And where did you meet them? In Las Vegas. In what context did you meet them? The Miss USA pageant. Do they ultimately host the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Russia? Yes. You did not go to that, right? I could not go. After that pageant, were you aware of any business deals that the Trump organization was pursuing with the Agalarovs or the Crocus Group, their business? Yes. What were you aware of? That Don Jr. and Emin were contemplating a development by the Crocus Center. What kind of a development? Real estate development. Well, what kind of a development is there when you've got the Trump organization and one of the largest real estate developers in Russia? Do you think they're going to build a food truck? Jesus. Were you involved in that deal? Not at all. Who else was involved from the Trump organization in that potential deal? Unaware. But you know Don Jr. and Emin were putting it together. Correct. Do you know it ultimately never happened, right? Correct. Do you know when it ended? I do not. Did you ever have any conversation with Don Jr. about it? Yes. Describe those conversations. It was around the time that we were doing the LOI with Mr. Sater because he wanted to make sure that I knew that there was still the possibility that he was going to be doing something with the Agalarovs. So in October of 2015, there was still the possibility of that deal coming through, possibly. What did he say? Just that we're working and dealing with the Agalarovs, in Moscow, to just make sure that if we have to terminate the LOI, we can do that without any significant fighting. Excuse me. This really draws out my mouth quickly. Goldman. I want to briefly just go back. Bear with us here. That conversation you had with Alan Garten about the statement from Air Force One issued by Don Jr., who did Alan Garten tell you was on Air Force One? Obviously, the President and Hope. But that's Hope Hicks. Back to the text. He did not identify each and every member that was sitting with the President during the back and forth exchange of the document when the President wrote the draft. And where was Don Jr. at the time? Was he on Air Force One? I believe he was with Alan Garten. And so that's why Garten was going there back and forth with Air Force One? Correct. And you had mentioned Hope Hicks was involved on Air Force One. Who else was involved? Jesus Christ. Again, I don't know the specifics. Who did Alan Garten tell you was involved? I don't recall him saying specifically who was there. What did he tell you about the back and forth from Air Force One to Don Jr. and back? What was the discussion? It took a long time getting the document finally drafted because there were just so many back and forth edits, and they drafted. They sent it to Don Jr., and then he looked at it, and then they drafted, and then they changed it, and back and forth, and finally, that this was the statement that came out. And were you familiar? You testified last time that you subsequently recalled that Don Jr. whispered something to Donald Trump behind his desk, that you connected the dots and thought that related to that meeting that was the subject of the statement. Do you recall that? Yes, but now we're in a whole other time zone. Yes, but that statement related to that meeting, right? I believe that it did. I was suspicious. When I ultimately learned that there was a Trump Tower meeting that involved that whole group, just for some reason, it clicked to me. And it was during that conversation, Monaco, with Alan Garten, Goldman, yes. Cohen, no. uh, Mr. Goldman, it clicked with you another time, yes. So by the time Alan Garten was relaying to you about the Air Force One conversation, you had you already, I had asked Alan, had that suspicion? Again, I would have to just go back and see what date it was that Alan was at my office. But when it came to the Trump statement from Air Force One, it's really kind of unrelated to my suspicion about the meeting. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking if that was the connection. No, I had asked Alan, what's the story with this statement? To continue. Why are you talking about adoption? I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me. And that's where we got to having a conversation about. It went back and forth and back and forth. And finally, this is how they ended up drafting the statement for release. Did Alan Garten indicate to you that he knew the statement was false? He did not say those words, no. Well, without saying those specific words, did you understand that he knew the statement was not accurate? The Democrats have done that this time and time again, asking Cohen to read the mind of someone that they think is up to no good and want to get a soundbite. Again, thanks to Uncle Bobby for that. Want to get a soundbite about how Cohen knows that so-and-so was lying. It's pathetic, but they're doing it time and time again. And every time they try to do it, Cohen slaps them into the dirt. It's beautiful. Let's go back to the question. Well, without saying those specific words, what did you understand that he knew that statement was not accurate? I don't know what he knew. I knew from reports that it had nothing to do with adoption. How did you know that? Because I saw the reports talking about the headlines that said to obtain dirt on Hillary Clinton, the emails. Separate from the media, did you have any conversations with Alan Garten about the fact that they were going back and forth about the statement in order to come up with a story? That's the impression. Yes. Did he indicate to you that Don Jr. knew it was a false story? Well, obviously Don Jr. knew it was a false story. Did Alan Garten indicate to you that Don Jr. knew? Not that I recall. I know you had. We discussed your role in the campaign, the limited role you had. I'm sorry, my finger keeps spasming, and it's hitting the right mouse button. I apologize for that. There's nothing I can do, so I'll just have to try. I'm trying to adjust my finger so it's not on the button, and it's very difficult. I apologize. Did Alan Garten indicate to you that Don Jr. knew? Cohen interrupts, not that I recall. Question, I know you had. We discussed your role in the campaign, the limited role you had. Cohen interrupts. I didn't have a role. Question, other than the minority outreach. Answer, but that had nothing to do with the campaign per se. That was my decision to create the National Diversity Coalition. Did you know someone named Joed Zamel? No, sir. From the Said group in Israel? No. Did you go to the Republican National Convention? I believe so, yes. Your wife is a Ukrainian native, right? Correct. Were you aware of any discussions about the party platform being changed at the convention? Oh my God, not this canard. For those of you who haven't heard my reading of the Mueller report, or who skipped that part when you read it, there was this rumor that the Trump team forced the Republican National Committee, the group, the board that met regarding foreign policy, that they forced them to water down the language on the foreign policy board to make it apparent that the Republicans were going to go easy on the Russians. And that's not what happened at all. There was a statement that one of the people on that committee said they wanted to change, and it was in relation to the Ukraine. And it basically said she wanted to change the line from any appropriate aid to basically any deadly aid or any armaments that they may need. And the Republicans, especially those associated with Trump, didn't want that in there. They didn't want to saber rattle right off the bat through the Republican platform. So there was discussion, and there were other people who weren't necessarily thrilled about this addition, and ultimately the board decided to not include that language. That's it. So it wasn't that the Republicans watered down the language. Excuse me, the Trump supporters watered down the language. I keep saying that. It's that they were able to keep more critical language, more harsh language from being added to the platform. They kept the platform the same. That's all that happened. So they didn't change it, they kept it from being changed. Entirely different narrative. Question: were you aware of any discussions about the party platform being changed at the convention? No. Let's talk briefly for a second about what's an individual named Andrei Artemenko. Do you know Andrei Artemenko? I know who he is. Have you ever met Andrei Artemenko? Yes. How many times? One time. Where was that? That was at the Lowe's Regency Hotel. When? It was after January 2017. And who else did you meet with him? Felix Sater. And what was the context of your meeting? Felix asked me to join him in a meeting with Artemenko. And what was that meeting about? When Felix first asked me to join him in the meeting, he didn't say. And when did you learn what that meeting was about? When I got to the meeting. Who told you what the meeting was about? Artemenko, Felix. Which one? Both. What did he say to you? So he introduced himself. Sorry, what did Artemenko say? So Artemenko introduced himself, told me that he was a member of parliament in the Ukraine, okay? And then he turned around and told me that he was going to be running for the presidency of the Ukraine, that he's the Donald Trump of the Ukraine. Okay, that's great. Then he proceeded to tell me that he was aware that there were significant dollars being stolen from US aid that was being sent to the Ukraine, and he had all the proof, and that some of the things he was going to campaign on, the corruption that's taking place in the Ukrainian parliament by its leadership. And what was that plan? Did he tell you? That they were stealing money from US aid. And I said, I'm pretty sure Mr. Trump wouldn't be happy about that. You should certainly notify the White House. What else did you discuss at that meeting? Then he asked me, then Felix turned around and said that he also thought, and then Artemenko then took over and said, I also think that in order to stop all the killing that's going on in Crimea, the way to do it would be for the Ukraine to lease to Russia for 100 years Crimea. It would stop over 10,000 deaths. And what did you say in response? That's great. Nobody wants to see 10,000 people die. What did he say next? Then I sort of thanked him for his time. I finished my coffee and chocolate chip cookie. And then I realized I was swimming in a lane that I had no business in, and I picked myself up. I thanked him. And then they asked me if I would take a document, and I said, for what reason? They said, well, who can we send this to? And I said, you should send it to the White House and send it, attention, President Trump, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They said they don't need a zip code. They know where the Capitol is. They said, well, who else can we send it to? So I said, Michael Flynn. So he said, well, why Michael Flynn? Well, he's the only guy who has actually a post position as of right now, and that's who you should send it to. He said, okay, would you take a copy? So I said, sure. I didn't want to insult him. He was a member of parliament, so I took it. It's a one-pager, two-page, and it really wasn't about Crimea. It was Felix had typed out the notes for what he wanted to discuss, since Andrei Artemenko doesn't write in English. So I said sure. I took a copy, and as I was walking home, I threw it in the garbage can. You never delivered it to Michael Flynn? No. I didn't think it would be nice to throw it away in front of his face. Brutal. Did you ever receive a letter from Felix Sater in connection to this Ukraine peace plan? It's a bullet point. It said, lease Crimea to Russia 100 years. However you would describe it, did you ever, I wouldn't call it a peace plan, I'd call it a bullet point. Okay, did you ever receive a letter in connection to this discussion? No, sir. See, they're not getting a thing. Not a thing. Let me turn briefly to the inauguration. What was your involvement in the inaugural planning committee? Other than raising money, nothing. How much money did you raise? For the whole campaign and the inauguration, I don't know specifically, but it was like over $15 million. Do you recall who you specifically raised money from for the inauguration? A whole slew of folks. I don't have the exact list, but can you remember one name? Sure, Ike Perlmutter. I got it from Andy Introtter. Introtter? I got it from Howard Lutnick. I got it from, oh boy, Mr. Monaco. We can give you a list. Ahmad Zameri. No, I don't know if I got Ahmad or Elliot Brody took it. I don't know. Everybody was fighting for who gets credit for what. Did Elliot Brody have a relationship with Ahmad Zuberi? That's where I met Ahmad through. And what do you know about the relationship? I don't. They're both from California. Did there come a time when you had a conversation with someone named Stephanie Wilkoff? Yes. About the inaugural committee? Yes. Who was Stephanie Wilkoff? She's a friend of mine. And what was her role in the inaugural committee? She planned 2 of the functions. She was supposed to be involved in all of them, but she ended up only being involved in 2. And did she raise any suspicions that she had about the inaugural committee to you? Sure, she did. What did she say to you? It didn't make any sense, the amount of money that was spent on the inauguration. And who was ultimately responsible for the purse strings on the inaugural committee? 3 people. Who? That would be Tom Barak, it would be Rick Gates, and Jared Kushner. They were the 3 who had authorization over the money that was donated to the committee. Correct. You mentioned that you raised money from Andy Introtter. Who is he? Andy Introtter is a private fund in New York called Columbus Nova. He runs it? It's his? Yes. He's the principal. How much money did he donate to the inauguration? $250,000, I believe. Are you aware of his relationship with Victor Vesselberg? I am. What is that relationship? I believe they're like 4th cousins. I love it. And do they have a business relationship, to your knowledge? They did years ago, yes. And what was that relationship? The largest investor in Columbus Nova was Victor's company called Rus Nova. And was Victor Vesselberg still an investor in Columbus Nova as of January 2017? If he was, it was minimal. How do you know Andy Introtter? I met Andy through a mutual friend, also from California. Around the time of the inauguration? Prior. How long prior? I would say around the time that Mr. Trump became president-elect. Let me just stop for a second. All of these Republicans from California who know each other, it makes you realize that a number of California Republicans are so small that they probably all know each other. And I'm only saying that half jokingly. Question. And how did you come to think that he would donate $250,000 to the inaugural committee? I didn't. I asked. Why did you ask him? Why are you asking the stupidest question in the world? Maybe I can ask myself. Back to the text. Why did you ask him? Because I also got him to donate money. Because I also got him to donate money to the campaign. And did he ever? I apologize. So I need to restate it was prior to Mr. Trump becoming president-elect that I had met him. And did he ask for anything special in return for his $250,000 donation to the inaugural committee? No, just 2 tickets. Did he say who the tickets were for? Yes. He was told me he was going to bring his cousin Victor. Victor. Did he say anything about why Victor wanted to come? No, he just wanted to come to the inauguration. Do you know who Victor Vexelberg is? I do. Who is he? He's an oligarch who's also close with Putin. He's got businesses all over the world. Did you see Victor Vexelberg at the inauguration? I saw Victor, yes. Did you speak with him? I said hello, yeah. Describe the conversation that you had. How's everything? What's going on? Standard type of pleasantries. Did Andy Intrater or Victor Vexelberg try to get any access to the president or administration officials? Not that I'm aware of. This Columbus Nova, did you ultimately enter into a consulting agreement with them? I did. For what? The purpose was to develop an infrastructure fund. One of the things that the president talked a lot about was raising funds that he would go to rebuilding our roads and highways and bridges and so on. He then went to Riyadh, and he went to the Arab Emirates and Japan and China. I just raised $250 billion, 250. One of the things that Andy and I were going to do is put together an infrastructure fund, but specifically, we were looking to build a rebar manufacturing facility. Well, you entered into a consulting agreement with him, right? Yes. And what was the purpose of that consulting agreement? In order to go raise funds from overseas investors or U.S. investors for the infrastructure fund. If I may add, that is a completely normal and above-board business activity. Whenever you're going to be putting together funds for a project, you will create one of these agreements so you can bring money in. They also created a corporation for this, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the same thing. You have to protect your money, so you incorporate this agreement in order to keep you from being overly exposed to liabilities. That's the way I understand it. Yeah, if I'm wrong, chat or comments below when this posts to YouTube. And what was the purpose of that consulting agreement? In order to go raise funds from overseas investors or U.S. investors for the infrastructure fund. Have you ever had a business relationship with him before? No. Were you ever asked to use your connections to the administration in furtherance of this consulting agreement? Not that I recall. Did you ever speak to anyone in the administration on behalf of Columbus Nova? I spoke to David whatchamacallit. It's a friend of mine. We'll get his name. Head of the VA. David Shulkin. He's a friend of mine for 20 years. I should have remembered. So I spoke to David Shulkin about Andy Intrater as an investor, or Columbus Nova is an investor in Not Juul, Enjoy, which is one of the e-cigarettes. They spelled Juul wrong. Juul spelled Juul. And one of the things he wanted to do is get a name so that they could send a proposal to stop veterans from smoking tobacco, but rather use Enjoy as opposed to cigarettes. And that was a part of your consulting agreement that you did that? I was available to him if he had questions. He also had, years ago, applied for OPEC funds, and he has a company which is overseas that manufactures with American parts. I think it's lighting, light bulbs, and things like that. So he had asked me who they could reapply for an OPEC loan for that company. I gave him the name, but he never ended up sending the proposal because they never ended up putting one together. And just to be clear, before the election, you never had a business relationship with Andy Intrater, right? Correct. I had just met him and we became family. Are you aware of how large Columbus Nova is in terms of assets under management? Columbus Nova or Rus Nova? Columbus Nova. No, I'm not. Okay, it's a multi-billion-dollar fund. Columbus Nova? I believe. I don't believe you're right. Let me back up because that got a little confused there. Question, Columbus Nova? Answer, no, I'm not. Okay, it's a multi-billion dollar fund. A, Columbus Nova? Question, I believe. A, I don't believe you're right. I don't believe you're right. No, sir. Rus Nova is? Answer, Rus Nova is. That's Victor Vexelberg. Columbus Nova is not a billion-dollar fund. And how much was your consulting agreement? It was $1 million for 1 year. I didn't take the full because after things started getting hectic, I couldn't continue to look at different opportunities. I brought this one great opportunity to him as well that we were going to do, which is taking ice pops that are infused with less than 5% alcohol. So you can, instead of remember you were kids that you could have those big ice pops? Now it tastes like a Moscow Mule or a pina colada, things like that. I have yet to have a Moscow Mule, and I don't like coconuts, so pina coladas are right out. In fact, I don't even like the pina colada song. That's how much I hate pina coladas. And now I have that damn song running through my head. Oh, God. It's going to be a bad day. Back to the text. Cohen continues. And because of my relationship to Steve Wynn, we were going to bring them to Wynn as a test, where instead of taking 100 people in order to sell 1,000 drinks, here you have ice pops, which are more refreshing, that taste exactly like it. And unfortunately, my kids suck them up even though they're underage, but don't tell anybody, and they thought that they tasted exactly like a regular drink. You're a bad dad, Mr. Cohen. You're a bad dad. And that would have been a great opportunity, and it was a buddy of mine from college who built the machine. It was a fabulous opportunity. Unfortunately, all this nonsense put a damper on that. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing with Andy was also create business. Goldman, 1 minute, please. Pencil neck chairman. So I'll allow the members to go around the table with their remaining questions, and Dan may have some final ones, and then we'll see if... Okay, so let me just motor through these very quickly. The Ukraine peace deal are talking points that you discussed with Mr. Artemenko and Felix Sater. The Russians desire to have relief... Sorry, I got an itch right under my thigh. Did the Russians desire to have relief from sanctions as a part of that deal? Was that part of the discussion? No, sir. Do you know whether that was one of the talking points in the so-called peace plan? I didn't even read the document. He put it into an envelope and then sealed it. And like I said, it went into a garbage pail. I think you testified earlier you don't know who Konstantin Kalimnik is, right? Is that right? I do not. And did you become aware, apart from the public press reports, at any point that the campaign had shared polling data with Mr. Kalimnik for some reason? No, sir. Was Don Jr. aware of Mr. Sater's role in the Trump Tower Moscow deal, his efforts to try to put it together? Yes. If Don Jr. testified, I don't remember him per se having a role, would that be false? That would be false. Did he understand that Mr. Sater was on the other side of the Wait a minute. Was Don Jr. aware of Mr. Sater's role in the Trump Tower Moscow deal, his efforts to try to put it together? So we're talking about Mr. Sater's efforts to put together, and did Don Jr. know about that in relation to the Trump Tower Moscow deal? Okay. Cohen says yes, so we know that Cohen was aware of it. Chairman, if Don Jr. testified, I don't remember him per se having a role, would that be false? What? Let's see. If Don Jr. testified, him per se having a role, would that be false? So, if Don Jr. said that he had a role in the Trump Tower Moscow meeting or deal, that would be false? Oh boy, I don't get it. A typical Democrat question. Typical pencil neck question, for that matter. Pencil neck. Did he understand that Mr. Sater was on the other side of the transaction with IC trying to put the deal together? Yes, that he was the licensee's rep. So if he represented that he would only speculate that Mr. Sater played a role as broker, that would not be accurate testimony? No, it would not be. And now they're getting their sound bites. But I don't see if Don Jr. actually said any of this. The chairman says if he represented, that he would only speculate that Mr. Sater played a role as a broker. That would not be accurate testimony. Is he saying that he did actually, and they're going to bring him in and ring him up? I don't know. Cohen, no, it would not be. Chairman, pencil neck. Are you aware of any foreign contributions to the inaugural committee? I am not, no. In your written testimony before the Oversight Committee, you testified that in July 2016, days before the Democratic Convention, you were in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Was it that Rona who made that announcement? I believe so. And Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone? Yes, sir. When Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he'd just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange had told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days there would be a massive dump of emails, did Mr. Trump seem surprised by the information? Yes. And he responded with something along the lines of, that would be great? Well, yes, after Roger finished. And then he asked me, he goes, do you think Roger is telling the truth? Which is why I know that this was the first time that the Assange scenario came up. Because if it was the question to me, do you think that Roger is telling the truth? Do you believe Roger? I said, I don't know. Roger is Roger. You never know. How does that in any way point to this being the first time? It was the first time that Cohen was in the room after Trump took a call with Stone. So there wouldn't have been an opportunity to ask him in a normal sense before then. I don't get it. I think they're pushing it again. Pencil neck. And when Roger was on the phone, did Mr. Stone indicate whether he would follow up in any way with Mr. Trump and inform him of anything else he learned from Mr. Assange? Yes. He turned around, and when Mr. Trump said to him, okay, good, let's know. And what did Mr. Stone respond to that? Okay. And Roger Stone called many times to the office. Chairman, and are you aware whether he made calls to the office after that conversation you overheard on the speakerphone? Roger called quite often. And that continued through and past that date of the conversation you overheard? Yes, I believe so. So there would have been future opportunities for Mr. Stone to share information, if any, that he gleaned from Mr. Assange. If any, yes. Okay, fine. Notice how they do not put out the date that Stone had that call with Trump. They never do. And if they have, you would know by looking at it that there was a decent amount of time between that phone call and when those emails dropped. At least in my memory. I could be wrong. Again, chat or discussion below. But it wasn't an imminent act of releasing those documents, those emails. Stone was being Stone, self-promoting, putting something in the works to get his name out there. That's why Stone is under indictment for lying to Congress. But with the Mueller report coming out and all the other things that are about to come out, I don't think Stone's ever going to see a courtroom, the inside of a courtroom. I think he's going to be fine. So there's that. I believe Mueller is just holding on to the indictment to squeeze Stone, no pun intended, but he's not going to get anything out of him. Because I don't believe Stone has anything to give. So yes, there's the great Roger Stone, Julian Assange conspiracy that has been debunked time and time again. Doesn't stop the Democrats from trying to bring it up. Pencil neck. Ms. Spire. We'll just go down the line. Spire, thank you. Mr. Cohen, you've been quite willing to answer all our questions, and we really appreciate it. Cohen, it's only 24 hours. Spire, do you have any recognition about the sale of the Trump mansion in Florida to Mr. Rybolovlev? Cohen corrects her pronunciation. Spire, say it again. Rybolovlev. You do, huh? I do. What can you tell us about that sale? So Mr. Trump had purchased that property in Palm Beach for a little over $40 million. We really didn't do much with the property. I know he slapped a couple coats of paint onto it, wanted to sell it. I believe it was sold to Sotheby's brokerage. Dmitry Rybolovlev works with the real estate broker that was down there in Florida. And I know he was asking like $125 million for the property, and they ultimately settled on a price of $95 million. And that was in 2008, at the beginning of the recession, correct? Right before. He literally timed it. I mean, the sale could not have been timed better for Mr. Trump. Mr. Rybolovlev, or however you pronounce his name, never saw the property, correct? I'm unaware. I've never met Mr. Rybolovlev. And he's Russian, correct? He's Ukrainian, I believe. He's Ukrainian, but he has ties to Vladimir Putin. Oh my God. Everybody that speaks with an Eastern European accent has to know Vladimir Putin. That's the way it works, folks. Didn't you know that? Every Russian, every Ukrainian, every Crimean, they all know Putin. Jesus Christ. But he has ties to Vladimir Putin? I don't know the answer to that. Okay. Do you know anything about the Alpha Group? Alpha Group? Or Alpha Bank, I should say. The only thing I know about Alpha Bank is there was, I think, some issue with an off-site server. But no, I don't know anything about Alpha Bank. Majority Exhibit 38 was marked for identification. Spire. So could you look at Exhibit 38, please? Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to produce his first name. Georgi. Cohen. Correct, sir. Spire. Georgi, okay. And he's a personal friend of yours? Yes, ma'am. And what does he do? Georgi is an investor in various businesses. He has a company called the Toroil Group. Toroil. And he is a U.S. citizen? I believe he has U.S. citizenship, yes. Is he also a Russian citizen? No, he's Georgian. He's Georgian, okay. Here's the gentleman that I did the Trump Tower Batumi deal. He's the gentleman that I did the Trump Tower Batumi deal with. Spire. So he sent you a text that says, stop flow of some tapes from Russia, but not sure if there's anything else, just so you know. How did you respond to that? Tapes of what? You wrote tapes of what? And he responded in return? Not sure of the content, but person in Moscow was bragging had tapes from Russia trip. Getting some lightning out there, so if the stream cuts out suddenly, it should come back pretty quickly. We're on a primary circuit, so we're one of the first people to come back with power. Spire. So this was a text that you received on October 30th, 2016, correct? Correct. So it's days before the election. Yes, ma'am. And then subsequently he says, we'll try to dial you tomorrow, but wanted to be aware. So he's trying to alert you to something, is he not? Yes, ma'am. Do you believe it has something to do with Donald Trump? Yes, I know it does. And tell me why you know it does. Because he told me. He told you in a text or, no, ma'am, on the phone. So the following, you had not had a conversation on the phone on the 30th. Is that correct? That, I believe you are right, yes. And then he says, I'm not sure. Quote, I'm sure it's not a big deal, but there are lots of stupid people, close quote. And you indicate you have no idea. Mr. Cohen, when I said that you have no idea how many stupid people that there are. Spire, I do not trust me. What does he mean? What is he suggesting there? I do. Trust me. Oh, I do trust me. Cohen, I don't know. Spire. All right. So you, and then he says to you, Cohen, oh, I'm sorry, I do. Meaning he knows how many stupid people that there are. Trust me. Okay, I do. Comma, trust me. Cohen, he needed a comma or a period. I hate when people do that. I punctuate all my texts, just so you know. And I rarely use abbreviations. I rarely use emojis. I'm old school. Spire, he then says to you, he needs to make it to the White House, Mike. This is all on the 30th. So you have a conversation with him when? Probably the next day. So probably on Halloween, December, October 31st. You talk to him on the phone. And what does he say to you? That this is regarding the infamous P tape where Mr. Trump was in Moscow for the Spire interrupts. It wasn't infamous then, was it? Cohen, yes, yes. That tape, the conversation about the tape, had gone back almost a couple months past when they were there for the Miss Universe pageant that tape existed. So you're suggesting you've known about the rumors about this tape for many years. Yes, ma'am. Before October 30th. Oh, yes. And did you ever try to follow up? Did you ever talk to Mr. Trump about this potential rumor? Yes. And what did Mr. Trump say to you? It's not true. But it persisted, evidently. Yes. Of course, idiot. It's a salacious rumor. It's a very salacious rumor about a very high-ranking individual in the business community, in the Russian community. Why would it not persist? People still talk about Richard Gere and the gerbil thing. That never happened. People still talk about, what's his name? Rod Stewart and that incident with his stomach. That never happened. What would you expect? Oh, no, it has to be real because people talked about it for months after it had come up. Oh, give me a break. But it persisted, evidently, yes. As some things do. And did he ask you to follow up and determine where that was coming from? He asked me to find out where it was coming from, yes. And what did you find out? It didn't exist. Who did you talk to determine that? Many people. Over the course of the years, I must have had half a dozen people reach out. One gentleman reached out to me, I don't know who he was, claiming that he had the tape. I said, okay, send me 4 seconds of it and name your price. So he turned around and he said to me, I'm not sending it to you. So how do I know you have it? He said, well, you're going to have to trust me. I said, well, how much do you want? He said, 20 million. I said, sure. Why don't you tell me that bank account you want me to wire it to and under whose name? Excuse me, I've got something in my eye. See if that helps. So he said to me, he goes, I'm being serious. I'll release the tape. And I said, well, send me 4 seconds. Not even any of the salacious stuff. Just send me something so I know it's real and I can walk into Mr. Trump's office and I'll figure out how to get you, how to get you your money. He hung up on me, never heard from him again. Gee, go figure that someone lied. Spire. So, but it persists. And then you're hearing it again on October 30th. It does not become public knowledge until January of 2017, when BuzzFeed releases the Steele dossier. Cohen, that's not really true. There were conversations way before that. TMZ, Harvey Levin called me, and he had heard about the existence of it. Other people had heard of existence of that tape. Okay, and that conversation has been going on very much like me being in Prague. It's just something that Spire has a life of its own. Cohen, correct. Just to kind of be comical for half a second. Do it. Cohen, when I was speaking with Mr. Trump about it, I said to him, I'm a little disappointed. He's like, what do you mean? Why? And I said, well, I would have liked to have been invited to the party. It sounded like it was wild. And he goes, Michael, it never happened. And I said, all right, if you say so, it never happened. And he said, no, I'm serious. It never happened. This whole thing is just pure nonsense. And I believe it simply because, as everybody said to me, the event was over kind of late. And then I spoke with Keith Schiller about it, who told me that he had brought Mr. Trump up to his room and then stayed there about a half hour to ensure that he was okay, then went to his own room. And I said, well, if these women were brought in and then they urinated on the bed, where did Mr. Trump sleep? He said, well, you're right about that, so I'm sure it didn't happen. That's how we kind of deduce it didn't happen. That's a nice piece of logic there, if I may add into this, Mr. Cohen. I had never thought of it that way. It's not like you call up downstairs and say, hi, I just had some Russian hookers do some wet work in my room, and I need a new mattress. If any hotel I would have slept in, they would have said, flip it. uh, okay, Spire. Did any foreign national offer you money during the campaign as a campaign contribution? No, ma'am. Is it safe to say that Donald Trump was shocked when he had won the election on election night? I'm going back to my New York thing. You think? What did he say to you? He didn't. When he won, I was already at the hotel. I was there with my daughter. He was not there, and neither were most of the members of his family. Only until the time that they started saying that it looks like Donald Trump may have won the election did he ultimately show up. I believe that should say, did he ultimately showed up. And he was fortunate that it didn't get called until around 3:30 in the morning, because he didn't have a speech prepared either way, concession or victory. And came there, and the following day, when I saw him in the office, he goes, man, you believe it? And I was like, no. And he said to me, he goes, wow. He goes, this is going to be something. And I was like, yes, it's going to be something. There's a conversation for the ages. Move over, Gettysburg Address. Spire, something. Cohen, something. Spire, what about that infomercial you referred to? Cohen, well, that's how the campaign started, that this was supposed to be the greatest infomercial in the history of U.S. politics. That was why he was sitting at around 2 or 3% at the very beginning. It's funny, because he would turn around and say to me, so what chance do you think that I have of winning? And I would say, well, 10%. He goes, no, 3%. Okay, you're right, 3%. I'm not a pollster, prognosticator. He says 3%, 3%. Monica, we've got to keep moving. I have a plane to catch. Spire, he was having fun there. Monica, I have a plane to catch, though. Spire, all right, okay. I'll yield back at this point. Pencil neck. Mr. Quigley, thank you. You mentioned, and it sort of trailed off why you ended the relationship, the contractual relationship, or stopped doing work for Columbus Nova. Could you spell it out just a little bit more? Sure. What ended up happening is they had the raid, and it sort of preoccupied all of my time, and I couldn't follow through. One of the things Andy and I were going to do is travel overseas, where I have a lot of contacts and relationships. And we're going to go raise a lot of money for Columbus Nova Fund for infrastructure. And I believe you mentioned that you understood that Victor had invested in Columbus. Correct. Do you know how much, and how did you know that? Andy told me that he was initially the largest investor in Columbus Nova. And then Andy did very, very well for himself, and he actually wanted to break away and not be under, Victor's Roots Nova and do his own thing. And Andy is an American citizen. Quigley, but you mentioned that he was still invested, but if it was a minimum amount, and how much, Cohen? I don't know. I don't know any. Quigley, he could still have been invested at the same level, for all you know? No. I remember Andy had told me that he had reduced the level of his participation in projects significantly, and I believe that was in Andy's interest. He wanted to really be his own guy, but he made a lot of money over the years. That's my emphasis. Quigley, you can imagine why people would ask you those questions, because there's Victor, who's not an American, and it is money flowing through Columbus Nova, which is doing business with you. So it obviously could be suspect as money flowing through a legitimate source to help the Trump inauguration, the Trump campaign, or yourself, who was seen as someone very close to the president to be, correct? Yes, I could see that. But at the same time, with that relationship, if I wanted to reach out to Putin in order to build the Trump Tower Moscow project, I certainly didn't need to go through anybody. Then I could have just gone straight to Victor Vexelberg or through Andy. There you go. There you go. Short, sweet, and to the point. Cohen didn't need all this subterfuge if Trump had a direct line to Moscow. There would have been none of this screwing around with Felix Sater, baiting and switching him, getting him to bite on trips to Russia that would have turned out to have had no purpose because Sater didn't have anything set up. That was all a waste of time. And if the Russians were dead set on Trump building that tower in Moscow so they could get leverage on him, why was it never built? Seriously, folks. Okay, back to the text. Quigley, and this is $1 million contract, correct? Correct. Over the course of a year. And how much do you think you actually received? About half of it. About half? You stopped getting any when it was terminated? I told Andy that I didn't feel comfortable. Andy actually became a friend, more of a friend than a client. And we used to go for lunches and dinners with his wife and my wife and so on. So he never mentioned anything about Victor asking him to do certain things, help anybody in particular. Andy never said anything asking you to help anybody, asking Andy to help anybody, or help the Russians or anybody in that vein at all. Now it's 4:47 p.m. on their clock. Cohen, not that I recall, no. Quigley, okay. Cohen, nothing to do with Russia. Okay, thank you. Swalwell, Mr. Cohen, just closing the loop on the Rybolovlev sale. Did Mr. Trump... Oh, man, it's really raining out there right now. Oh, boy. We don't need it. We do not need the rain. We're not as bad as Missouri or Iowa, but we do have some flooding going on downstream in the Fox River. Not pretty. Okay. Let me go back just a little bit here. Andy never said anything asking you to help anybody, asking Andy to help anybody, or help the Russians or anybody in that vein at all. Cohen, not that I recall, no. Quigley, okay. Cohen, nothing to do with Russia. Okay, thank you. Mr. Swallowwell, you can guess who that is. Mr. Cohen, just closing the loop on the Rybolovlev sale. Did Mr. Trump know that he was Russian as it was being negotiated? Well, yeah, he's not Russian, he's Ukraine. Did he know that he was Ukrainian as it was being negotiated? Yes. Did he tell you that? I think I may have told him that he was Ukrainian because I think he's the principal of a company called Fertile. Fertilizer? Yes. And that was before the sale closed? Yes. Well, somebody is coming up with $95 million, and they're going to be wiring it. I found out who it is, and I Googled it. Were you aware of any efforts by anyone in the Trump family or organization or campaign once the Mueller investigation began to destroy evidence or to get rid of any evidence that could be incriminating? Unfortunately, I wasn't at the Trump organization there, so I wouldn't know. Swallowwell. But I mean, just through conversations you had, were you aware of any efforts to kind of reduce liability or exposure by getting rid of evidence? I'm not aware of any. Were you familiar with any communication device, or were you familiar with any communication platforms that were used to evade maybe a wiretap or detection, like Signal or Confide, or some other types of messenger apps like that? For crying out loud. These people are just ridiculous. Cohen, I'm aware of those, yes. Swallowwell. Are you aware of people in the Trump family or the organization or the campaign using those once the Mueller investigation began? I'm not aware. So you never heard anyone say, hey, let's just talk about this on Signal or keep this on Confide? Not that I'm aware of. I'm sorry. Too bad, Swallowwell. With respect to the tape that was being discussed, were any of the offerings or suggestions that were made to you that tape may be out there, was any of this outreach submitted to you via email? Like, do you have any Trump org emails where an offering like this was made? I don't believe it was by email. I believe it was phone call. Why would you send an email if you're trying to remain anonymous? Emails can be traced back to you. Although I believe there are email services that will give you a P.O. box email address. I've seen it used on some corporate accounts, although I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just an email service, but it looks like they can block the trying to follow back that email address to an IP. I don't believe it was by email. I believe it was phone call. And were any of the phone calls made by people who you believe to be Russian or Ukrainian? Like, was it a rumor that it was domestic, or were there, Russian Americans or Russians who were also perpetuating Cohen? The only one that I can obviously recall would be now. This one, Yergey, said to me that somebody in Moscow told him that they had this tape, but the rest were domestic. Is Rona Graff the type of person who, just like you, would also lie to protect the president based on your... Oh, man. Again, the Democrat questions are just so transparent, so ridiculous. Finish that question again. Swallowwell would also lie to protect the president based on your... I can't answer that question. She's very loyal to Mr. Trump as well. How about Mr. Schiller? Have you ever seen him lie before for Mr. Trump? Yes. Have you seen him tell a significant lie for Mr. Trump? I don't know what you deem significant. Well, what did you see? Keith is the ultimate protector, and he was his bodyguard, his attaché for many, many years. And he was the keeper of Mr. Trump's secrets. So, for example, if he was going to text a female, he would have Keith do it on his phone. What are some of the lies that you saw Mr. Schiller tell to protect Mr. Trump? I don't know. I can think about them. So they've got a soundbite that says Schiller has lied for Trump, but they have no proof. They have no concrete lies. They have no time frame. They don't even have a lie at all, made up or not. Again, they've got nothing. Swallowwell, with respect to that Moscow trip, the Miss Universe trip, who was on the flight with Mr. Trump and Mr. Schiller over to Russia? I believe Don Jr. was there as well. I truly don't recall. I didn't go, so do you know why they used Mr. Ruffin's plane rather than Mr. Trump's plane? I believe his plane was down. Do you think Mr. Schiller, is someone who has a good memory? Yes. Why do you say that? Well, he was a detective in the New York City Police Department, and I think he was with the Drug Task Force. First, I think he was with the Department of Corrections. In terms of Swallow interrupts, I guess just your observation. Was he someone who had a good memory? Yes. How about Ms. Graff? Not as good as Keith's. Going back to, you said to us and to the House Oversight Committee that you have suspicions of collusion. And if you were in our position as investigators, who would you talk to corroborate these suspicions? What other witnesses would you go to kind of fill in that color on your suspicions? So now he's asking Cohen to do his job for him. Cohen, can I think about that? Get back to you with the list? Yes, please. Finally, with the phone call, this is supposed to be the lightning round. Finally, with the phone call that you said Mr. Trump made to you after the raid of your house, I want you to just take a moment because you have a very good memory. Cohen has been saying, I don't recall, or not to my memory, about 80% of the time in answers to these questions. And Swallow says he has a very good memory. Cohen even said that after he was disbarred, He wiped all the legal training out of his mind, so he couldn't even answer a basic legal question that was posed to him by the committee yesterday. Or my reading yesterday. This is pathetic. My favorite word for these proceedings, and it's accurate. Okay, swallow well. I just want you to take a moment because you have a very good memory and because you've been able to recall a number of conversations throughout the years, but this seems like a significant phone call. It's the President of the United States calling after a permitted... Sorry, I'm trying to read too fast. President of the United States calling after a pretty traumatic moment in your life. What did he say to you on that phone call? Cohen very much said, this is getting out of control. This is this witch hunt. It's terrible, for you and your family. It was really it was just more like a human type of conversation. Did he ever say that you're going to be okay? I'll make sure okay. He said that many times, including the same line was repeated to me by Jay Sekulow. Prove it. Same thing, don't worry, everything is going to be okay. This was the call after the raid. Yes. I remember one of the people in this committee on the Democrat side, when he referred to the raid, he started to say raid, and he said, no, don't use that word. Call it a search. And he's the only one who's held to that. Everybody else, including Cohen, including the Republicans, raid. Did he ever tell you to stay strong also, always? And that includes the call after the raid? Yes. Pencil neck. Mr. Heck. Mr. Cohen, I just want to thank you very much for your presence here today and last week and for your forthcoming testimony. And because I believe the staff and my colleagues have been incredibly thorough, and because I, too, have had major shoulder surgery, and I have more than a good idea of what you're going through right now, I'm going to go ahead and defer and pass to Congressman Maloney. Cohen, thank you. Thank you. Maloney. Pencil neck, Mr. Maloney. And Mr. Maloney starts. Can I ask you just one thing? And I apologize if you've covered it before, because I had to step out for another hearing. But the conversations with Mr. Costello, did he initiate those conversations, or did you initiate those conversations? Cohen, no, he did. Actually, the conversation was initiated by Jeff Citron, who was the senior partner in that firm. Do you know Mr. Costello before the communications we've been discussing today? I'm sorry, did you know? No, sir, but I did know Jeff Citron. And it was Mr. Citron who reached out to you. That's correct, yes. You did not initiate those conversations. No, sir. So if Mr. Costello suggests otherwise, that's not accurate. That would be an absolute lie. Maloney, thank you. Pencil neck. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Thank you again, Mr. Cohen. A couple of Monaco. Sorry, we have to go. Cohen. He's going, not me. Davis, I'll cover you. Cohen, thank you. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Yeah, you better stop billing right there. You better stop the billing right there. Cohen. No, the billing continues to run until he gets home. Davis. You all know I'm here pro bono. Cohen, it's amazing. He even charges me when he eats. I guess I still cough when I laugh a little bit. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Oh my gosh. And Cohen's sitting there in absolute abject pain, agony even. And he's still coming up with these quips with Mr. Davis, his attorney. Oh. Let me make sure that's true then. I'm sorry, it's Mr. Monaco who's leaving, and Mr. Davis is staying. So, that's right. Monaco and Davis are his attorneys. Cohen continues. Can I tell you one last funny story, by the way? I think you'll all appreciate this. Did you see Saturday Night Live? Did you notice when they kept saying, Mr. Cohen, over here, something interesting that's funny? What they don't know is I'm deaf in my left ear, and that's why I couldn't hear anything on the left side. And that way, and the way that sound rips around the room, sometimes it's very difficult. I'm not fully deaf. I'm like 90% deaf in the left ear, and I just couldn't hear where it was coming from. And with the cameras, right, hundred of them inside your face, I couldn't figure out who was talking to where. But Ben Stiller did a great job. He's very funny. Chairman, pencil neck. I'd say it's not bad to have Ben Stiller play you on TV. Cohen, wait until I see him. See if it's funny then. um, oh man, I've got to visit Cohen in prison. I've got to drive. I think he's here in Wisconsin, actually. Um, or was that Papadopoulos? One of them was in Wisconsin for their stint. Papadopoulos was only in for 11 days. So, but still, yeah, funny, funny, funny. Okay, back to the questioning. Mr. Krishan Morthy. Mr. Cohen, going back to the instruction to say that the conclusion of the negotiations of Trump Tower Moscow was January 2016. Okay, let's go back to that. That wasn't an instruction. No one told Cohen to use January 2016 as the completion date of the Trump Tower Moscow deal. Cohen came up with that on his own. And then, according to him, Sekulow told him to keep with that and to keep saying the party line, to keep going with the party line. The party line that Cohen had created. I don't believe any of it. I believe Cohen just lied because he lies. I don't even think he meant to do any harm. He lies, so he lied. I know that's a tautology almost, but there it is. Okay. Conclusion of negotiations. This is Krishan Morthy again. Conclusion of negotiations of Trump Tower Moscow was January 2016. Did anybody explain to you why it was important to have the conclusion be before the Iowa caucuses? Cohen, well, the Iowa caucuses was obviously a date, seeing that it's the kickoff to the campaign. Sure. Did they say something to the effect of, well, if it got out that we were continuing to negotiate after the start of the Iowa caucus, that would be a bad thing for the campaign or a bad thing for the Cohen interrupts. It wasn't specifically laid out. It was just this is a good cutoff date to use. And an important thing was also stay on message, right? And I said it 100, and I say it 100 times. No Russia, no collusion, no business, no deals. Minimize the Trump-Russia connection because that was a topic that was obviously prevalent in the papers. Krishan Morthy, got it. He continues. In August 2013, it was reported that, maybe you talked about this earlier, I'm sorry, I was shuttling between committee hearings. In August 2013, it was reported that Eric Trump said, quote unquote, well, we don't rely on American banks. And then, for financing, we have all the funding we need out of Russia. Do you have any idea what he's talking about in that quotation? I have no idea, but actually, somebody who you would want to speak about that, would be Jason Greenblatt, who worked on all the deals. He was general counsel at the time, and of course, Alan Weisselberg. They would be the two people that I would go to first in order to find out what Eric was talking about. Okay, and was it your observation that in the purchase of properties, whether it was golf courses or homes, that they were primarily done with cash in the later time frame before you left the organization? Cohen, I've never seen that happen where it was cash. I think you're referring to like a satchel full of cash? Krishan Morthy, no. I mean like wire transfer of money as opposed to debt. How is a wire transfer cash? I mean, does anyone know that? Have you ever heard someone say, "Oh yeah, I'll give you cash," and like, "Oh, great, let me go get something." No, 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 I'll wire transfer it to you. That's electronic. It's not cash. It's fucking pathetic. Cohen. The only one I'm aware of is the one with Dmitry Rebel. I wish that name hadn't come back. Rebelovlev, where it was a wire that came back from his bank because I was tracking that with Alan Weisselberg just to make sure that the money hit. Okay, because I reviewed the sale contract that was done by Sotheby's. Okay, last question. The term witch hunt. Did he ever use that term in running the Trump organization? In running the Trump organization? Yeah. Did he ever? No. Use that term before becoming president? No. Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I don't get it. What is he going to get from that question? Um, if Trump used the term before, does that lessen its impact on his railing against the Mueller investigation? Railing with all accuracy and truthfulness, but still, he was going after Mueller. You could use the word railing, um, but yeah. So what if he did? Man. All right. So Christian Morthy says, "Okay, all right. Thank you, Cohen. Thank you, Chairman Pencilneck. Just to follow up real quickly, you mentioned Mr. Greenblatt and Mr. Weisselberg as two people who would be knowledgeable on whether Russia money. I thought this was supposed to be the lightning round. Knowledgeable on whether Russian money was being used to finance some of the Trump properties, or you're probably aware we're looking into the allegations that the Russians may have laundered money through the Trump organization. In addition to those two individuals, are there other people who you would recommend that we talk to on the issue of alleged money laundering or Russian financing of Trump properties?" Cohen. Other than the children, Don Jr., Ivanka, Eric, no, no. There's a misconception about the Trump organization that it's this big, massive company with 10,000 employees. It's not. I mean, the entire company was really run by 12 of us. Well, overlapped, like I would do a lot with Alan Garten and George Soriel, with Larry Glick and Ron Lieberman and Alan and Jason Greenblatt. If you take a look at just the executives who are there, you can pretty much just figure out exactly who you would want to speak to for every single night, like Larry Glick ran golf courses and Ron Lieberman helped in order to do budgets. So if you are looking at anything with golf courses, then those are the two people that you would want to talk to. Now, I don't think you're going to find Russian money in order to do these golf courses because he didn't pay a lot for the properties. And then what he does, I'm sure he's talking about Trump, and then what he does is he creates the golf course and then sells memberships. And a membership, say $50,000, but he'll sell 500 of them. And that more than pays for the entire golf course, plus what he spent in terms of building the clubhouse. And then basically, they foot the bill by the monthly chit chat that they're required. Monthly chit that they're required to pay, whether it's food or with their membership. So it's not as if you need Russian money in order to pull something like that. But the two individuals you mentioned would be the two that would be knowledgeable about, in the case of the golf courses, where the money came from to buy those courses? Cohen, yes, in order to build the golf courses too. But it's not nearly as expensive as you may think. Well, I never knew that. And I always thought golf courses were expensive to build. So that's really something to know. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Everyone here, except a few of you, I guess, learned something today. And knowing is half the battle. Do, 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 do. Pencil neck. There have been public reports that the Trump organization invested upwards of a couple $100 million in cash in these properties. To your knowledge, would that be an amount the Trump organization would have liquid on its own? So the answer is yes. I was sitting in Mr. Trump's office one time, and a gentleman came, knocked on the door, and handed him a check. It was actually from Steve Roth of Vornado. They had just done a refinance. This was a couple years back, maybe 5, 6 years back, when they had refinanced, I think it's 1320 Avenue of the Americas in Manhattan, as well as the Bank of America building in San Francisco, and Mr. Trump has a 30% interest in those two buildings. The check was like slightly over $100 million. So yeah, he would have had that cash sitting around. Chairman. And Mr. Krishnamurthy mentioned a comment, I think, from Eric Trump. There was another comment from one of the sons, Cohen. I believe Don Jr. made a similar comment too, about Russians are our best clients, our best customers. Chairman. Or a disproportionate share of income was coming from Russia? Right. Oh, Jesus. Pencil neck. I gotta say that twice now. Pencil neck chairman. There, I caught up. Do you know the basis of those comments? No. Pencil neck. Mr. Swalwell asked you about encrypted apps. Are you aware of people using encrypted apps either during the campaign or during the investigation that followed? Yes. You said you didn't earlier, or was that only about the Trump organization? I'm not sure. Let's just say he asked about the Trump organization. Okay, so using encrypted apps, Cohen says yes. Chairman, who is that and what apps were they using? Cohen, I don't recall the app. It could be whether it was Dust or Signal or one of those apps. And as I had said, I think the last time, I don't have access to those phones, which are still in possession of the SDNY, but I would be able to give you a list once I see the phones in terms of who I communicated with that had that specific app. So you had those apps on your phone? I do. And there were people that expressed to you a desire to communicate with you over those platforms. Yes, I just don't recall how those conversations, took place. Hey, we should just communicate through Signal or through Dust or what have you. But you may still have some of those conversations on your phone. Well, not Dust, because it automatically wipes itself out. Chairman, if you could check those encrypted conversations that you still have and determine if any are relevant to the questions we've asked you today, sure. And as I've said, I pledge to you on both sides of the aisle, any questions that you have or any additional things that you want me to look for, information to provide, just reach out, and I'm happy to comply. Yeah, that's why you only got 3 years for all the felonies you committed. Okay, pencil neck continues. Thank you. Mr. Goldman, you can finish up. Goldman, real quick. Do you recall any conversations on encrypted apps that were designed to avoid potential detection? I believe they all are. But was there, that's the purpose. Right. Cohen, I love you sometimes. Goldman, right. Was there a particular reason why you were communicating with people on the campaign or the Trump organization? It wasn't with the Trump org or the campaign. I think it was Post, which is a couple of people. Who? You don't remember anyone? I don't. I really don't. Davis, well, look. Goldman, have you ever been to Augsburg, Germany? I've never been to Germany. Let me just ask you a couple questions about, I know this is not your, Cohen, why does she get to leave? We're almost there. I know this is not your area of the financing and banks, but do you know which banks the Trump organization either had loans from, bank accounts with, or any other businesses with? Well, they have bank accounts local in the States. I believe that they have with Signature Bank. Just, local banks. At one point, they asked Ivanka to join the board, so we moved a bunch of accounts over there as a sort of way of welcoming her to her, wow, trying to read too fast. So we moved a bunch of accounts over there as sort of a way of welcoming her to their board. But most of their financing deals, I believe, went through Deutsche Bank. And as far as other monies that existed, I believe that they were done through funds like Steve Mnuchin's fund, which I think is Colony Capital. They were a lender on the Trump Chicago project, so I don't even know whether, he's interrupted, so it wasn't a commercial bank. It was more of a private lending? Correct. Them and others. They parceled it out. Do you know which others? I don't, but I do. Again, I can tell you Jason Greenblatt was heavily involved in that. Was Trump Chicago the last actual real estate development that the Trump organization did that was not a licensing agreement? Ground up? Yeah. I think so, yes. When was that? That would be the first season of The Apprentice. Okay, not the Matthew Calamari season? No, actually, that may have been the finale, the famous Whoa. That was when What's-His-Name won. Okay. Sorry, I was checking something and lost my place. I'll be right with you. That's when What's-His-Name won. Question, right. And who was the contact at Deutsche Bank for the Trump organization? Rosemary Varblick, I believe is her last name. Varblik. Do you know where Alan Weisselberg's son works? Which son? He has two. One works for the Trump organization, and the other works for a fund that I believe it was also a lender to the Trump organization. I think it starts with an F. I don't recall. Does does that ring a bell? Ladder cap. It doesn't start with an F, it starts with an L. I was close. Both letters in the alphabet. Oh man, this guy's a card. Question. The checks that you received for your reimbursement for the Stormy Daniels payment, I believe came from Capital One? That's correct. So were there accounts at Capital One as well? No, he wrote a bad check. He wrote a fake check. You idiot. Okay, Cohen's answer, yes, because Capital One is a bank that's actually located in the property that he owns, which happens to be the building that I live in. Real quick. Well, do you know if there are any foreign investors in the Trump organization or any of the deals as far as you know? I don't believe so. The Trump Foundation, do you know if there are any donations ever from foreign entities or from foreign individuals or entities? I'm not aware of any. Do you have anything really to do with the Trump Foundation? Yes. Oh, I apologize. Let me rephrase that. Could you ask that question about foreign donors or foreign individuals or entities? The answer is yes, I do. Sorry. Who is that? That was the one I had negotiated with Viktor Pinchuk from the Ukrainian American Chamber. It was the Ukrainian American Economic Forum, is exactly what it was called. And I negotiated a scenario where they wanted Mr. Trump to come to the Ukraine to become a part of it, and he obviously wouldn't go because of timing. And I negotiated instead that they would do it about Skype. They would do it about by Skype. I have no idea what that means. And it was a 15-minute Skype scenario where they put a big television screen on in the room, and they had a translator who would ask questions of people in the audience, and then he would respond back and forth. It was 15 minutes for $150,000. He had me direct them to use the foundation to make the payment. Why? Well, probably not to pay taxes on it or to hide the fact that it was a foreign entity that was paying. Did he say this to you, or are you speculating? No, I'm speculating. Anytime Cohen comes up with something that makes Trump look bad, he doesn't know for sure. He has no proof. It's in his mind. Did he ever indicate to you that that's why he funneled money through the foundation for other purposes? Answer, would be probably not paying tax on it. But did he ever tell you that? Not word for word, not word for word. In code? I knew the reason why he was putting it there. He considered the foundation to be his checkbook. It's his money. That's how he would refer to it. That's exactly what he did. He had me do a contract that had the funds wired to the foundation, and, he would direct me to speak to Alan Weisselberg in order to get all the wiring instructions and to establish it with Alan so the payment would be made. And when was the Skype conversation? During the campaign? Yes. You didn't put any time on it. You said he obviously couldn't, but yes, it was during the beginning of the campaign, I think. Okay, last topic. The BTA Bank. Yes. What was your personal relationship with them? I met the gentleman who was CEO of the collection part of the bank. It was like $4, some say $6, some say $8 billion that was stolen by a gentleman named Oblyasov, something like that, who was Kazakh. He's living now in France. And he stole between $4 billion to $8 billion from the bank, and they wanted to find that money, both overseas, but also in New York. There were a couple of real estate projects that were funded in part with that money. So they wanted myself and Mark Kasowitz to go and try to reclaim the stolen funds. Was any of the money invested in the Trump organization or Trump organization deals? No, not that I'm aware. Completely separate. Completely separate. Okay, 1 minute. Just one last thing. Are you aware of any other banks other than Deutsche Bank where the Trump organization received financing from? Banks? Yeah. No, but again, a lot of it was done with these private capital groups, like even the one with Mnuchin, which I think was either Dune Capital and also Colony Capital. I'll get you the names and I'll send to you as I go through. Question, that would be great. Who dealt with apartment sales, even in the licensing agreements, right? The Trump organization helps to try to sell condos. Is that right? Correct. And who from the Trump organization was responsible for that aspect of the business? There's been a few people that have come and gone, so I don't know who the person that is currently running Trump Realty. But that's what they do. They put in house brokers. And again, I don't know who the individual is today, but I can find out. Who was it while you were there? There were several different people. Let me stop there for a second. A lot of these things where Cohen says, I can get that for you, I'll look it up. He doesn't work for any of these people anymore. They're not going to take his calls. He's going to jail real soon. Why can't the brain trust in the Intelligence Committee on the majority side put together their little easy bake oven wattage brains and figure out how to ask these questions themselves? These are easy things to answer. I don't see the problem with them doing their own legwork and putting it all on Cohen. There's a few things like phone conversations that Cohen had that would be up to him. But as far as that bit about, did he have any encrypted conversations that he had left? He had already said that they were all on the phones that were in evidence at the SDNY. How's he going to get a look at those? Some really weird stuff going on here. To back up Cohen's last sentence, and again, I don't know who the individual is today, but I can find out. Who was it while you were there? There were several different people. There was a guy named Bob Cunningham. There was a young lady, I forget, I'm blanking on her name, but there were quite a few people over the course of the years that ran Trump Realty. Okay, Mr. Cohen, we may have some follow-up questions, particularly about the structure of the Trump organization and who focused in what areas and during what time periods. Would you be willing to answer follow-up written questions on that? Yes. And we may have some additional requests, including the spreadsheet of potential projects that you referenced as being passed around after the election. I'll look for it if I have it. If not, the Trump organization should have it. Okay. Davis, active deals? Chairman Pencilneck. Ms. Spire had one last question. Cohen, you're excellent on TV, by the way. Spire, thank you, especially when you're nice to me. I know they're not like, Don Rickles funny, but still, he just catches me by surprise. Oh my God. I've been upset during a lot of these interviews, especially the Papadopoulos interview and the Baker interview. They really, put a twist in my gut. But this is the first time I've laughed more than I've ranted, I believe. Hopefully there's a few more, but this is great. Cohen, especially when you're nice to me. Ms. Spire, Mr. Cohen, you just said that it was, at least I got to the impression that Donald Trump would have money put in the foundation to avoid paying taxes, and this one payment was done for that purpose. Were there other deals that actually funneled the money into the foundation to avoid taxes? I don't know so much about deals as much as opportunities. So, for example, when he did the Battle of the Billionaires with Vince McMahon, that was, I believe, either $4 or $5 million for his appearance. That money ended up in the foundation as opposed to him individually. So even as an example, during the campaign, when he elected not to do the second debate, instead to raise money for veterans, We directed people to send the money to the foundation as opposed to the organization itself or some other entity. Okay, well, now that makes sense because these are charitable donations. Now, do you as an entity? I'm sure the foundation, I'm sure, is a 501c, either C3 or C4, probably C3. Trump's lawyers would be very smart to have done that, and it seems like he usually has pretty smart lawyers around him, Cohen being the exception to the rule, of course. So let's assume it's a 501c3. I don't believe they have to pay taxes on donations because donations are tax deductible to the giver. And 501c3s aren't supposed to have to pay taxes as long as they're not for profit. So if Trump's collecting money for a fund to help veterans, I believe it was disabled veterans, if I'm not mistaken, if Trump's doing that, then why shouldn't the money come into the foundation? Although it would have been smarter and it would have been more legal to have created a 501c3 specifically for this event, so that way there wouldn't have been any question at all. Maybe he did that after he received the monies and paid out of that. I'm not sure. I think maybe he did pay out of a personal account, which would have made things a lot more interesting. But I don't know a lot about it. A lot of this is just off the top of my head. So forgive me for wasting your time. Okay, Spire. So the painting that he had purchased through a straw person was not the only incident where he used the foundation as his wallet. No, it was not. Now they're actually getting somewhere. Can you give us any other examples? I did. Between the WWE and also I had asked an individual to make a donation for the veterans, and he gave me $1 million. He did $500,000, and his wife did $500,000, and that money was put into the foundation. On top of that, we also used the foundation for, at one point, when I was negotiating a settlement on a case that dealt with Alonzo Mourning, the $1 million Zoe challenge. The guy is a nephrologist, hits the ball, and puts it in. Could you imagine? And there was no insurance onto it. And there was a big fight as to who was responsible for the $1 million because they hadn't taken out the hole-in-one golf insurance. And they claimed that a guy, you can't make this stuff up. Ian Galuli put out the emails that said, don't worry, I'll make sure that the distance is accurate. But the distance wasn't accurate. So even if there was insurance, what's going to happen? And then Alonzo was holding Trump, Briarcliff Manor, and that was the one in Westchester. And then Alonzo was holding Trump, Briarcliff Manor, that's the one in Westchester, responsible. And what I ultimately did was I created a concept of you become a member at every single Trump golf. I called it the Trump Centurion Package, where you're a member of every, you become a member of every single golf course. Though you choose one, you didn't have to put up a bond. But the only thing you ended up paying is the monthly charge onto it, and you become a member for life. And you could play at any golf course you wanted, and you're technically a member of all. And we sold 3 of them using Charity Buzz. One went through the foundation. It was another way of just paying an obligation that didn't belong. You can't use the foundation to pay obligations, so Spire interrupts. Was there ever a sexual harassment case that was filed, or at least a request made of Donald Trump in an elevator sexually harassing someone? No. I think what you're referring to is there is an allegation of a tape that involves, I talked about this at the House Oversight, with Mr. Trump and the First Lady, and, just like the P tape, I don't believe it exists, and I don't believe that he would ever strike her. Okay, all right, I yield back. You're really putting me through agony. I thought you liked me. Pencil neck. The contributions, Jesus, they're massively assholes. Pencil neck. The contributions you mentioned that went into the Trump Foundation, the $4 million or $5 million in fees that he got for being on the show, the Cohen, the Battle of the Billionaires, pencil neck, Battle of the Billionaires. He would put that into his foundation so it would not be considered income to his person It would not be if it's sitting in a foundation. And then he would write checks on it as if it was his personal bank. I don't know what he used the monies for. Only Alan Weisselberg would know. Well, we know the portrait. Yes, he did that with the portrait. Chairman, pencil neck. Any questions on your side? Redacted. No. Thank you so much for spending so much of your time with us. Pencil neck. Mr. Bitter has a final statement to enter into the record. Bitter. Thank you, Cohen. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. My name is Maher Bitter, and I'm the General Counsel for the committee. As Mr. Goldman mentioned, we will likely have follow-up questions. That will be conveyed through a formal communication to your counsels, and we will communicate in that respect. Cohen. And you can call me at Otisville State Penitentiary Camp. Thank you guys so much. Oh my God. To the end. To the end. They never showcased his sense of humor on any of the news shows. They really should have. I think it would have done a lot to soften his image on the Republican side. Because remember, he's a pariah on the Republican side. He doesn't have a friend in the world, except for the odd never Trumper. And even then, I'm not so sure. But he is a funny guy. Cohen, thank you guys so much. Mr. Bitter, thank you thank you very much, Mr. Cohen. Whereupon, at 5:22 p.m., the deposition was concluded. Okay, so that's all you get from me today. Now, I've linked this PDF in the description of this video. And you can see here, there are a number of statements, drafts, emails with redactions that you can peruse. Here's one of his statements that he gave to the work product draft for his first statement, I believe, to the committee back in 2017, and it goes on and on. There's hundreds of pages. What is this? I saw a little bit of a testimony. Let me see if I can find it. Huh. What is this? Oh, okay. This is his testimony from February that I've already read into the record. I read in Wednesday. So, let me see. Yes, Wednesday. So that's available to you already on YouTube, so you can find that easily. Now, what I've got to do is I've got to put in some tags and some links, internal links to the playlists, is what I mean to say. Playlists on the videos that I've just done the last 3 days because I neglected to do that. I was getting up really early, staying on pretty late, except for yesterday, but I was still really tired, so I didn't get to those. But I will do that right now. And I've got my note up here for the VIPS article about the hacking, quote-unquote hacking of the DNC servers, which was completely a lie. And we'll get to that. So until then, thank you, everybody, for watching this. I know this one wasn't very interesting, but it was very funny. So we had that going for us. So I've got a lot of transcripts to read because Doug Collins dumped about 8 of them the other day. And several of them should be very interesting because we've got Loretta Lynch and Sally Yates, I believe, and a couple others whose names pop out. There are a few names that I don't recognize, but I am going to do them in order of date. So they'll flow properly in case they reference one or the other. They shouldn't, because these are closed-door hearings, but you never know. Something might come up. So you're going to see some people who you don't recognize, but skip, tune in midway through, take a look at what you're hearing, and if you think it's interesting, go back to the beginning and enjoy yourself. Okay, that's it. I'll put out a video. Let me see. I'm definitely going to do one Monday. So I just haven't picked it yet. So I'll put out a video Sunday night letting you know the order for next week. I do have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday that's going to last all day. And I have an event Thursday starting at 4 that I have to get to. But I can pre-pack for that and leave out the door around 3:30 and I'll get there on time. So Thursday I will try to do at least a shorter segment. Some of these transcripts are only 150 pages or so, and I can do those in a few hours. So, because this one took me, let me see, I started at 11, so it took 2 hours. That's not bad. So we'll get through those. Yeah, probably, if I can get through one of those on Thursday, that would be great. That way we wouldn't fall behind. All right, now I'm done. So until next time, be well. God bless. Happy trails. See you soon.